Welcome to Beyond Service podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today by Oliver North. Oliver served for 6.5 years in the Royal Engineers as a physical training instructor. Since leaving the military, he's built a remarkable career as a successful entrepreneur and business owner. I know he'll have some powerful insights and valuable lessons to share with anyone navigating the transition from military to civilian life. Ollie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Owen. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us, mate.
No, it's a pleasure.
Thought it'd be a good place to start from the beginning. Be good to understand. I know I've just kind of briefly talked about it then, but good to understand what you did in the military, and then if you can just tell us a bit about where you are today as well, please.
Yeah, I joined the Royal Engineers back in '99. Straight out of, I'd done a couple of months at college, and then the old-fashioned recruitment techniques. I was doing cross country one day at college, and this recruiting sergeant had said, "Have you ever thought about doing this for a living?" I think he gave me a check for 250 quid by memory, which might have been the dangling of the carrot that works. And I joined upon a whim, really. Yeah, I'd only been in college for a couple of months at the time, I remember, and I didn't look back for most of that 6.5 years, to be honest. Loved my time in the military. I really needed it. At the stage of life I wasn't a classroom guy. I was impatient. And I think, I'm pretty sure there's an ADHD factor in there somewhere, but it's everything has to be given a brand these days, doesn't it? Which I'm not too kind of intent on putting in a bracket, but I really needed it at the time. It gave me really good discipline. Taught me, everything I needed to be taught at the time, at that stage of life. And I left the military in 2004, and I still look back at, it's not like you had a job. If you've had an employer for 6.5 years, early on in your career and all the rest, it's very rare that an employer can program you in a way like what the military does. And it, although I did learn a lot of bad habits in there, it taught me so much good. And I look back at it now with so much respect, and really fondly, actually. And so yeah.
I mean, you're right. It's I don't think there's any other profession that you become so engrossed in and ingrained in, because you live and breathe it, don't you? It's not a job. It's a way of doing things. It's a mentality. You live with the people you work with, and
Absolutely, yeah.
It does kind of indoctrinate, but also kind of hundreds of years experience of kind of turning civilians into military. It's a tried and tested approach to kind of discipline and resilience and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, completely.
So who are you today, Oliver? It'd be good to understand like what that is, and then we can kind of go into a bit more detail on some of that stuff.
I mean, to be honest, I'm still pretty much the same guy that left the military in many ways, although probably another 90,000 miles on the clock. But no, I mean, I came out in 2004. And I feel like when I came out, life got harder. It might have not been as hard physically and discipline wise and all the rest of it, but I think like rightfully said, the indoctrination kind of piece, the programming, and the framework, the daily framework that it gives you, it all goes, and it's kind of like taking a train off the tracks, and learning how to drive, over speed bumps and all the rest of it. So I think, coming out really was a culture shock. But I went into sales when I came out. After a short time as a personal trainer, I guess I was a physical training instructor in the army. I very unimaginatively decided to be a personal trainer for a couple of months, literally, and it was, going from the Friday screaming at recruits to get to the top of the hill, and shouting "It pays to be a winner," which I think is a banned statement now. To then, stood on the front of a treadmill, telling a 78-year-old Sheila that she's doing a brilliant job walking at 2 kilometers an hour. You know, the juxtaposition was so much that even though I like seeing progress on everyone, I just thought, look, I need to think outside the box a bit more in terms of personal, personal reasons too. Wanting to aim a bit higher. So I went into sales, and I just went with a philosophy that I cannot let a customer down. Never ever. And I think a lot of the core values that the military taught me, I took into sales. Although, I'm sure we'll go on it in a bit. I didn't go into sales as a former soldier and with that kind of mentality. And it took a while. It took a couple of years to reinvent myself as a civilian, and to take it from there. But luckily, over years, and I'm obviously as anyone, still learning, still figuring out the code. But I'm that far away from, I'm that far into civilianism, if that's even a word, that I hardly remember the military version of me now. So although I still keep a lot of the core principles that it taught me, all of the core principles that it taught me. So luckily, business has gone well. Since I first started my first business, North Fire, in 2008. I actually grew it successfully year on year, and then I was acquired in 2014 by my then Austrian partners, who were a multinational, big organization. They acquired my company and I retained 25% in 2014. And then I carried on as managing director and then majority shareholder until 2019, but then I was a fish in a very big pond, and I was a small cog in a very big machine, really. And I felt like it couldn't move at the pace or maneuverability and agility level that I wanted to. And as an impatient kind of, I suppose, impatient, or whatever adjective you want to pin to it, I left. I sold the last 25% of my shareholding, and I went again. In 2023, we brought back North Fire and the North Fire brand, and it's gone brilliant since we brought it back. And luckily, throughout all of my journey, the core team has stuck with me throughout. And I think it proves, people don't always follow titles; they'd rather follow courage. And I think, when you've got a tried and tested team that has the trust and the camaraderie, here at North Fire, it's a very safe place to work. There's no toxicity, there's no bureaucracy, there's no shareholders and multiple layers and kind of all that side of it. So it's as close to, I would like to think, a military organization, a civilian military organization, if that even makes sense, than any other company that I know, really. And I love that about it, in that we all work for each other, and the guys on the shop floor are the company, and we've got a really good family spirit here. And I know people overuse the phrase family feeling of a business or family business, and we genuinely are. It's a great place to work.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's so much good stuff from there, I think. And the conversation we've had before, like sitting down to record this, kind of rung true on that as well. Is what I get from you is, you're not about, being like overtly, I'm ex-army. That's not who, I'm not. It's not the first thing you lead with. But I think that's where, and we've talked about this, veterans can sometimes let themselves down if they're like too kind of like, you should respect me because I've done this in the military, I've done that in the military, or I deserve respect because I've done X, Y, and Z. And not saying that people don't deserve respect, but you can't have that just expectation, I think. But what you can do is you can bring the principles, the values, the things that you learn from the military, and apply them in the civilian sector. And I always say you're never a civilian. You'll always be ex-military. Like you don't never want to be like, you have to change and you have to adapt and you have to kind of look at ways of like, how do I raise the bar to the standard? But I'm gonna have to do it in a slightly different way. And I just see some people when they go in with that attitude.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And do you know what? I think I think often, if I see that a lot of I'm just getting to the point where, joining up in '99, and obviously we're now 2025. A lot of the guys who I joined up with, who are now, coming out after, full term, you know, they, they asked me some civilian advice and all the rest. In fact, the guy who used to be my boss, he was my mentor actually. I was posted to Osnabrück in Germany, out of training, and after I think 5 months or so at the regiment, I didn't realise the conversation that had gone on with the guy who became my boss. It was Royal Army Physical Training Corps guy, Mark Greste. He was a staff sergeant at the time. He ended up going through the ranks, becoming an LE officer, and he came out as a major. But at the time that I was issued to him, my troop commander then had said to him, "Look, we're struggling to challenge this kid. He's good. He's ambitious, and we need you to beast him a bit, really, and put him through his paces, and kind of focus on harnessing it." My troop commander at the time had said, "I'm not sure he's an overly passionate digger of holes," which is what plant operating carriers on, were reading, and that's what I did when we were in Oman, I was digging deep trench latrines with a medium wheel tractor, and it was fine, but it wasn't really floating the boat. So I got posted to the gym, put my PTI course early, and it really pushed me, really, really, really pushed me. And I looked up to him, really good guy. To this day is one of my best pals in life. It works with me now. It's just about to start as our European, what will become our parent company within the next month or so. He will work as a general manager over in overseas in Europe, in our factory there. So I think we've got a level of trust and years of camaraderie. So he asked my advice when it came out, civilian advice, and I'm still struggling with him a bit in that he was in the military for 35 years and he's past the point of reprogramming into a civilian, if he's being honest. But as we're doing a lot more in the defence sector now, that's fitting absolutely naturally and organically in there. But no, I think you and I shared the same opinion when we were talking before this, in that don't always introduce with, "Oh, hi, I'm ex-army, my name is," have that as one of the ingredients in the cake. That isn't the entire cake. I think there's something really endearing about someone who walks in smart, well presented. You don't have to grow your sideboards all the way down your face just because you haven't been able to do it. I think they've changed the rules now, or certainly in my day.
Yeah.
Or get fat, and I think, when they've had to really keep yourself conditioned and all the rest of it, keep yourself to those standards, and don't open with it. To have it in the locker as one of your ingredients becomes a really endearing thing. And I think, I personally, because obviously I've had time in the military, we've got a lot of ex-military guys here, and they are brilliant. But the blend of, I wouldn't be able to have 100% ex-military, because some of the graduates, for example, bring stuff that the ex-military guys don't, and vice versa. So blending it really nicely, and giving everyone their respect they deserve. I think we both see people come out and say, "Oh, Civi's this and Civi's that." Some of the fittest and strongest people I know have never been in the military. You look at a professional boxer. The what they put the bodies through for 12 weeks before a bout, and these, all this CrossFit, which is based on military fitness, I think, old school stuff, etc., etc. You cannot disregard someone as inferior to you just because you served in in the military. And I think coming out without that chip on your shoulder, I think that's the key phrase in it. Make sure there isn't any chip anywhere to be seen, and utilize the core principles that you've been taught and give them the respect, because it worked in there for a reason. Don't take them away and think because you used to have them, that's why you're entitled to anything. No one's entitled to anything, are they, as we know?
No.
And I think companies recruit on capability, or at least if they're a good company, they would recruit on capability, and capability and attitude. And as long as you've got those, then, in my opinion, then the military aspect of your CV comes in, honestly speaking, priceless, I think.
I think you're right. I think that's it's a really good point. I think that a lot of people miss out on is actually, you know what, you're going to work in environments that are very different to what you've been working in the military.
Yeah.
People are going to turn up late to meetings. They might be on their phone walking in. They might have their phone out during a meeting. They're probably not going to polish their shoes. Like they're going to have.
Yeah.
I remember, I went to, and I did what I'm, advising people not necessarily not to do is I went into a big corporate business, and I remember going into a meeting and I had my notebook and I was, tie on, and, was there 5 minutes before the meeting started and nobody else was there. And I'm like, I come to the wrong meeting room, and you're like,
yeah.
And then people just sort of walk in, and then I remember thinking, what on earth? And then I actually was like, I would give these people the benefit of the doubt. Half an hour into that meeting, I'm like, wow, these people know so much about this subject matter. I had no idea what they were talking about, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was a real lesson for me to be like, the way they go about things is different, but it's, you've got to understand that they've not been through that kind of structure that we've been through, and but it doesn't mean you can discount them as useful or efficient or good people. And it's just being able to kind of, like you say, take that chip off the shoulder. Right. But also, what I also trying to say to veterans is also don't lower yourself to lower standards. Try and raise the standards of everyone else.
Yeah. 100%.
In a leadership position, try and raise those standards, but don't maybe go in and start bawling and shouting at people and giving out press ups and repair dress and what have you. Because it's just not.
Do you know what? I think you absolutely framed it completely perfectly then, and that is the nail on the head. And the other spin that I put on that completely is, and I don't know if this is a controversial opinion or not, but I think that service leavers are better suited to SMEs than blue chip companies. So many of my ex-colleagues who were and still are really dynamic guys and all the rest of them, think, right, they take a big deep breath of air before they come out, and then they think, I have to be a project manager in a blue chip company. That seems to be now a project manager or a NEBOSH health and safety guy. By the way, both brilliant careers, of course. However, I'm not sure that that's the best fit to, in particular, the guys who I worked with then. I don't know if it's changed completely since I left, but I think, as you and I both know, we've had this chat before, I think, the bigger the company, invariably and naturally, the higher level of inefficiency. How many people have these massive organizations got, sat on a Teams meeting with 20 people, and they might do a different version of that back to back all day. How many of these people in these big companies every day sit on back to back calls and say, oh, I've been so busy back to back Teams, whereas they're playing a game on the phone whilst they're on them often. Whereas the smaller the company, I think it seems, the more efficiency that company needs, and I think, the difference that a service leaver can give to an SME is great, much far greater than what it would deliver as a health and safety guy in a huge corporation. And like I said, I don't know if that's controversial, and I'm not discrediting any of those working for a big company or being a project manager. I just think the style of the military, as I remember it, and as the guys that I worked with and me, lend themselves a lot more naturally to an SME. More impact. I think an SME has a greater feeling of, it's us against, as we used to refer to it, the enemy. We used to train to fight against an enemy. And, as the founder of Nike, Phil Knight, says famously, business is just war without bullets. And I think, if that gives a service leaver the purpose, a person without a purpose, is almost a person with nothing, and I think the purpose is greater than the salary. And I think naturally with an SME, if you are contributing and being the difference maker, you've got a bigger scope for being promoted quicker, and jumping onto a more successful career path. If you're raising a company's performance and not just your small select team by marginally, then that's why I think SME life gives a service leaver a bit more purpose. But like I said, that I'm sure there might be counter arguments to that, or what, I don't know, but that's how I see it.
No, that's a good point. And yeah, I think I'm never about trying to put down what anyone else does. If people come out of the military and they go into a big four or one of these big corporates and they're a project manager and they enjoy it and they have a great career, then I'm all for that. That worked in my journey. I did try and do that, and it didn't fit for me. But the thing for me was, and I speak personally, and it sounds like it's coming from the same from you, is that impact bit. Is that you mentioned that impact, and I didn't want to be a small cog in a big machine. I wanted to have impact and people, it's quite funny because people say, well, yeah, but the military is a big machine, and yeah, you know what it is, but you're actually got these really small tribes in the military, like
Yeah.
whether it's a battalion, a regiment, your squadron, whatever, your company, like sections, like we kind of just, that's the thing that the military, particularly the army, does really well, is like breaks it down into little groups, and then you always want to be the best in that.
100%. Yeah.
I always tell stories about how, like, you wanted to be the best regiment. Then if there's a few battalions in that regiment, you want to be the best battalion. And then you're like, well, there's 3 companies, this is infantry, or there's 3 companies in that battalion. We're the best company. And then
exactly. Yeah.
Then in your company, you've got your platoons. You want to be the best platoon out of 3. And then in the platoon, you've got, all the sections, and they want to be the best section. So it's like, we're creating, kind of building these environments where we're like, you need to be the best, and your little unit needs to be the best. It's all part of a bigger machine. But you have impact, like someone like you as a corporal or myself, as young leaders in these environments, like you're a young man or a young woman, and you've got real power, real authority, and like
Absolutely.
whether it's taking a full battalion or a regiment, whatever, on PT, and you're coming up with the programs to make sure that the troops are fit and healthy and strong, or whether it's leading as a full screw or a sergeant or whatever, like, you're in your 20s most of the time, and you've got huge amount of responsibility, or even your teens, and I think you miss that if you go into a big business.
Yeah, I do completely. And then you often get a bit disenfranchised, maybe with people who are promoted ahead of you, maybe because they've got a degree that you don't have, and things like that. So I think yeah, look, it's each person will come out and have the thing that suits them the most. But I think that the guys who are served with SMEs, it gives you the purpose. Like you said, it's competition.
Yeah. Agreed. And so I mean, I love the fact that you've pulled up the purpose bit there, and I can definitely, the conversations we've had, I can tell how much what your business and what you do and the purpose behind that is really important to you. In terms of, I suppose, then that's probably one element that you think you need to look at, and obviously you've talked about moving into SMEs, but what would be your advice to somebody who's going through the transition right now, and they're at that point, they've made the decision to leave the military, they may be in their year-long, process of leaving, resettlement. What if you could give them the key bits of advice that you picked up along the way? Maybe it's some mistakes you made, maybe it's successes, but just what you would sit down if you're sat having the conversation. What would that be, mate?
You know what? It's a really funny one, isn't it? Because I look at when I came out of the army, and I didn't have anyone to ask their advice, and I didn't have someone who would come out of the army before me really, and made a success of it. Because I left prematurely, I left on a whim, and I came out early, and then much like when I joined the army. I was a kid that I lived with my grandma when I was a kid, and even though we didn't have, much money, everything was clean and comfortable, and, you're always fed and you don't get given press ups, things like this, so then I joined the army, and it was a real culture shock, as a real young spotty kid, I'm kind of like, I hate this, which I think every kid hates it when they're going through training. They're being absolutely beasted within an inch of their life. But I didn't want to quit because I didn't want to go home, and I didn't want to quit, and I didn't. I wanted to say to prove to myself that I could do it. So much like when I came out of the army, I didn't think I'm going to have to join back up because I hate it out here. I hated it. I'd become accustomed to the army, and then I loved it, and it was my home, and the people were genuinely my family, And I came out on a whim, probably being a bit cocky, if anything, and I hated it. I wanted to come straight back in, and but I didn't want them to think I'd quit civilian life, weirdly, And so I forged on through, and plowed on through, and just made a shed load of mistakes along the way, and taught myself how to sell, how to be a good sales guy. And it's not a hard sell. No one likes being sold to. It's about being loyal to your customers, being trustworthy, turning up and instilling that confidence in them that they think, this is the supplier I want to be with, of whether it's a product or service that you're supplying to them. So I think, and then I was working for a company in the fire and rescue market as a sales guy. And I hated that company so much. It was the lowest morale place I've seen in my entire life. It was, I really disliked it. And I told the guy who owned the company at the time, he was the MD, I said, do you know how low the morale is? And, it's, how your own people genuinely talk about you when you're not there. I said, yeah, he's on the list of on the agenda that we need to address at some point. But I honestly think that's the number one. That's the number one thing. So it's his train set, and he should absolutely play with it as he wishes. But I didn't want to play with that train set anymore. So I left after 12 to 18 months, whatever it had been, and I set up my own company, and I created an SME that I would want to work for if I worked for it. Whilst making sure that the customers think this is the best supplier we've ever had. I didn't want to let anyone down. I didn't want to let my own team down. I wanted them to love working there whilst being very productive, giving them the maximum amount of purpose. So complete transparency, showing them this is where we are now. This is where we need to be to stay alive. And this is where we need to be to, for the team to, accumulate a bonus of this, incentivizing, and then, it's never been something I thought, oh, I need to try and work on the culture. I think, it's something natural in a business leader or a manager, that if he or she is a good person, that's something naturally that they'll instill straight away. So I think the purpose thing is just massive. In fact, I think it's everything. So yeah, I didn't have anyone to ask their advice. I had to really teach myself along the way. When I started my own business, I thought, look, sell as much as I can with as good a margin as I can, whilst the customer still has good value for money, and spend cost-wise as little as I can, And then as long as I'm creating the gap as big as possible, then it'll work, you know. And then obviously then as you go through it and, you know, you get a deeper understanding of numbers properly, and then, you know, you work, then, you know, I went in, you know, for an element of my career as a turnaround MD, a private equity backed business. And then those guys, you know, I felt I knew everything when I left the company that I'd founded in 2019. Those guys really showed me. And I was then parachuted and dropped into a company that had 150 people. The morale was the lowest I've ever seen. Really heavily unionized and argumentative shop floor. And they couldn't believe that I was out on the shop floor every day. And I was speaking to them and all the rest of it. They said, look, you should be in there. This is for us. That's for, you know, I was just, I didn't think companies as bad as that really existed, you know. So, you know, we drove that kind of transparency piece and we turned it right around. They voted their own union out because they wanted a senior works council to work and you know, discuss everything directly with me and all the rest of it. And it worked really well. And then, you know, I was in charge of that through COVID. And then we, you know, we were massively successful through COVID as well, you know. So, and then, you know, post-COVID, the conflict in Ukraine started, and, you know, we've been front and center there. You know, we were approached very early by the ambassador, the Ukrainian ambassador, who came up to the factory very, very early on in the conflict, and we've been doing a lot of work for Ukraine, you know, since. And I think that's where a lot of our ex-military contingent really come into their own in terms of all that really. So yeah, it's been quite some journey, and I think luckily, because we've always had a defence, or especially over the last 3.5 years, we've often had a very heavy defence kind of purpose. You know, even though I left the army in 2004, I felt at home again, you know, speaking to these guys, not knowing what they're going through, because obviously they're going through a lot more than I ever did. But, you know, it's, you know, if people are coming out of the military, you know, a normal company is, you know, is a company that make valves or makes springs that eventually go to a mattress company, or so on and so on, you know, engineering components. They might make tubes, you know, and then, you know, but, you know, the name of the game is the same, you know. Make sure your customers see you and know that you're better than any supplier they've got, and don't let them down. You know, that is the winning, and that is the competitiveness that you bring in and try and instill into the team that you're working for or who are working for you. And do you know what? I think it's just a respectfulness. You come out and you don't refer back to being in the army every 2 minutes, and you can't. You know, the common one is, you know, the mates you meet in there, you'll never meet out here, because you're almost, you know, saying the good days have always gone. I think if you come out with a mindset that, you know, you can apply those skills that you've been taught over the last 1 year to 22 years or 30, 35 years, and utilizing those core skills, you know, translated into civilian ways, you will be a success without any question. SMEs are screaming out for good employees, you know. And I personally think the veterans bring so much to any business, so much. And if I was competing against an SME that had an equal ex-military contingent and pride and passion and high culture, then you know you're going to have your hands full. You know you're going to have to be absolutely the best version of you to win. And that's why, you know, our here competitors, they hate competing against us, because we do have that, and the customers feel that, and naturally want to go with us over anything else in the market, you know. So yeah, I think that's the long and short of it, really. But you know, you talk about advice as well. You know, we have such a big network in the military. You know, the guys who have come out of the military before you, lean into all of them. You know, ask their advice on all of them. You know, you might get different snippets from from everyone, but use that, because I still naturally feel so much loyalty to anyone who I went through training with or was at a regiment with. I feel so much loyalty to them, and I absolutely feel obliged if they're coming out and they're asking for my advice. I feel obliged.
True.
Absolutely go out of my way to help them because, like I said, I think military service leavers are such a massive asset to any company if their head is framed in the right way when they're going in.
Amazing. There's some absolute gems there, I think, of advice, and I think what it all boils down to, I think, like veterans are, when they make, and I felt this myself. You're almost like looking at the big bad civilian world, going like, I don't know what anyone does. Like what do they do?
Yeah.
Sat there in front of computers and they're doing stuff, and like, what is it? What jobs? And like, you've really clearly articulated there, like, you didn't pick the right thing first time. Like you looked at personal training and that wasn't right, and then you went into sales, and then you ended up seeing it done badly. And it always seems to me with you, it seems to be about the people, and if you boil it down to that, like the military is very, very focused on the people. Like everything is about the people. I mean, the motto of Sanders, where I went to do my training, was, serve to lead. And it was always about, like you don't get in a position of power or a position of leadership and then you're on easy street and you let like the your soldiers or whatever do all the hard work. It's you should be if you're in a position of leadership, you should be harder working and looking after the subordinates underneath you. And I think
100%.
I think you've shown that actually coming out and and looking at a way a business wasn't run well, and then deciding to like you said, just set up a business that you wanted to work for and would enjoy working for, and then you've gone in to support other businesses that are failing, and the first thing you do is go and speak to the people and go and understand,
Yeah, 100%.
try and understand them, understand where they're coming from, and make their lives better. And realistically, that's all business is. It's like it's the
100%.
people doing it at the end of the day, and you look after those people, then everything else, and you can pick up the skills and knowledge, the experience, but what you can't really get that we've the majority of veterans have got is that leadership, the resilience, the the empathy, like all that good stuff that's ingrained into you in the military. Don't lose that, but then apply it. I think as well, a really good point you made there was like, it's a new career now, and it's like go into it with enthusiasm and drive.
Yeah.
Don't be like, oh well, that's the best days of my life over. I'm just going to survive now until I retire. And it's like, no,
Exactly.
what can you do now? This is the next phase of your life. Like really take this with the same energy that you apply to your military career, I think.
100%, and go again, and absolutely go again. And I think, like I said, the service leavers are an asset to any company. I personally think SMEs benefit more from that. And the other thing I would say to any of these service leaders that kind of look, take a deep breath in when they see City Street, is a lot of these big corporate CEOs in these, really fancy suits and all the rest of it. You think they must be brilliant at something. They must be absolutely amazing at something. But I've sat around the board table with some of the best in certainly in Yorkshire or wherever nationally. Some big hitters, and you're not that. Nobody's that far away from each other. They're not. I think your attitude and your work ethic is everything. You jump on LinkedIn now, every 3 posts, it seems, is work smart, not hard. But I mean, imagine if you work smart and hard, and do you know what? With a level of passion, we did everything with passion, didn't we?
Yeah.
You'd open your locker in training. I can remember looking at my locker in training, thinking, I can't believe I washed and ironed that, and it looks like people wouldn't believe the level of quality, and I know it's but it goes to show, if you apply that level of perfection to anything you're doing, you will absolutely walk it out of the army and out of the forces, and I think as long as they're not coming out already throwing the towel in and thinking, right, I need to survive until I retire, come out and see it as another challenge. you're back to the rank of pride. You know, you've got no rank when you come out. You know, you can be a lieutenant colonel. That rank in Civvy Street is private or SAP or whatever, you know. Um, and I think that level of hunger that you come out with, you know, go again and you apply those skills and you'll make anything out of yourself, anything. And, you know, even though, you know, it's flattering to you at the start, you know, successful entrepreneurial, or I'd never ever refer to myself as an entrepreneur. I think a lot of kids you see on social media do that about themselves these days. I feel like I still haven't, you know, I'm nowhere near yet. I think if I lose that purpose and never look back and stop and say, "Oh, you've done well," stop and look back, then I've stopped. You know, and I really fear stopping the progression. To be honest, it's my you know it's my biggest fear. So, you know, I've got to keep reinventing myself, and business does change, and industry do change, and never take anything for granted, and you know, always keep that complete humility. I eat in the canteen with the lads every single day, and not because we're a modern managing director. I even eat with the boys. I mean, I am no better than I'm no better. In fact, those guys have forgotten more today about, you know, engineering, hydraulic engineering, auto electrical engineering, etc., than I have ever known. So, you know, they are much better than me in so many aspects. So, you know, it takes all the cogs in the team to make it work, and that's why we eat together. You know, we win together, we lose together, we eat together. But every single day we smile together and have a brew together, and that is, you know, that's the special thing about the company, I think.
Oh, that's a really good way to finish, mate. Really good note to finish on. Absolutely love this conversation. I think it's just so good to see. You know, I know you don't think yourself a successful entrepreneur or business owner, but you are. You've done a great job. You've obviously really, really. I think what we said there, you've absolutely lent into this next phase of your life, and you know, you found out you did a couple of things that weren't right, and then you've picked up and you've really gone. And what you're doing is supporting the efforts in Ukraine as well, which is, you know, credit, mate. So I appreciate everything you're doing. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining the podcast, mate.
No, thanks a lot, Owen. It's been an absolute pleasure. And again, as I said off air, I think, you know, what you're doing with the podcast is so important, massively important to veterans. And I think it's missing it. I think you know, it's a very big community that needs to compare notes and share notes and all the rest of it. And I think, you know, hats off to you for what you're doing. It's brilliant, and I've got massive respect for it, to be honest. So amazing job, yeah.
Great to chat to you, mate. We'll speak soon.
Brilliant. Cheers, Owen. See you soon. Thanks, pal. Bye, bye.